FCC Chair Brendan Carr taking some heat over the weekend for a post he made on X, apparently threatening to revoke broadcasters' licenses over their coverage of the Iran war.
Now, that threat came in response to a Truth Social post from the president, who disputed a Wall Street Journal report claiming 5 Americans refueling planes had been struck in Saudi Arabia. The president wrote in part, yet again, an intentionally misleading headline by the fake news media. The base, yes, was hit a few days ago, but the planes were not struck or destroyed. He continued, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal in particular, and other low-life papers and media actually want us to lose the war. Their terrible reporting is the exact opposite of the actual facts. They're truly sick and demented people that have no idea the damage they caused the United States of America. And then there was this attack on CNN by Pete Hegseth during a press briefing earlier last week.
More fake news from CNN. Reports that the Trump administration underestimated the Iran war's impact on the Strait of Hormuz. Patently ridiculous, of course. It's a fundamentally unserious report. The sooner David Ellison takes over that network, the better.
Those rebukes of the media prompting Carr on Friday to post this on X, writing in part, broadcasters that are running hoaxes and news distortions, also known as the fake news, have a chance now to correct course before their license renewals come up. The law is clear. Broadcasters must operate in the public interest, and they will lose their licenses if they do not.
That post sparked a firestorm of backlash from the left. Chuck Schumer called the move, quote, vindictive and fascist stuff. And Congressman Ted Lieu issued his own warning back to Carr, writing in part, if you implement your flagrantly anti-First Amendment actions, you will be sued and you will lose. Take your fascist crap and shove it. Ro Khanna, writing his own post, you know the illegal war in Iran is a disaster when the FCC chair is threatening to revoke broadcaster licenses until they censor. Too many Americans have died and gas prices are skyrocketing. What's next? Censor X posts, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram.
Even some Republicans seemed wary of the move. Senator Ron Johnson said this on Fox News Sunday.
Yeah, I'm a big supporter of the First Amendment. I do not like the heavy hand of government, no matter who's wielding it. So, no, I would rather the federal government stay out of the private sector as much as possible. And really, the federal government's role is to protect our freedoms, protect our constitutional rights.
And then there was Senator Elizabeth Warren, who got into a back and forth with the FCC chair.
She slammed Carr online, writing, Constitutional Law 101, it's illegal for the government to censor free speech. It's just like, it just doesn't like about Trump's Iran war. This threat is straight out of the authoritarian playbook. Carr responded directly, Constitutional Law 101, quote, no one has a First Amendment right to a license or to monopolize a radio frequency. To deny a station license because, quote, the public interest requires it is not a denial of free speech. Supreme Court in Red Lion, quoting NBC versus United States, 1943.
As for Trump, he said in a separate post on Sunday that he's, quote, thrilled to see Brendan Carr, the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, looking at the licenses of some of these corrupt and highly unpatriotic news organizations. They get billions of dollars of free American airwaves and use it to perpetuate lies, both in news and almost all of their shows. Okay, there are a couple different issues here. Different circumstances are different.
Don't you have nuance for this one now? Because
well, there is some nuance because, okay, you want to start with the Brendan Carr part of it. Yeah, it is true. The FCC does regulate those channels, and it is proper, and the Supreme Court has said it's consistent with the First Amendment, for there to be some accountability for them, because there's a finite amount of bandwidth, the way the technology works, and so the FCC has more power there than the government has over, for instance, the internet, because the internet is non-rivalrous. It doesn't crowd you out. Somebody else having a website or somebody isn't stopping you from having a website. So the government doesn't need to do much there. So that's what's different about that. Also the Wall Street Journal report Trump referenced was incorrect. So if he's just yelling at them for getting something wrong about a detail of the reporting on the war, that seems perfectly fine to me. He can be mad at them about that. They did get it wrong. Pete Hegseth mad at CNN was the weakest one of those three to me, because it seems to me like the administration also didn't have a plan for the Strait of Hormuz to close. It closed, and it seems like they're blindsided by that. And then Trump said over the weekend that he wants Like he's called on a random assortment of other countries, the UK, China, Japan, France, to send ships to reopen it. So if you're just saying, hey, I want other people to do this, it doesn't seem to me like they had a plan for this to happen, because it is closed and that is bad, and the plan is to ask someone else to do it. So I'm not even sure what's wrong about that reporting, so I disagreed with Hegseth there. But Trump was fine to, again, correct the Wall Street Journal. They got that wrong. And Brendan Carr, I agree, he should not be over. There's been too much. It's been too heavy-handed. But there is some restrictions on if you receive a license from the FCC.
For sure. But to me, this is another step in the president, defense secretary, Brendan Carr, also all trying to have some sort of state-run media. We don't live in a country that has state-run media where we're told what to say and what to do on outlets by our president. That's not called freedom of press. That's the president gets mad with a criticism of him on air. And so pardon me if I compound these recent statements with what he said historically that has bothered him, that the news doesn't cover him in any positive light. And that's not what is required. The news journalists are required to tell the truth. And so there was errors in the Washington Post. That's fine. You can call out an error. Or Wall Street Journal. You can call out an error. But what you can't do is threaten every single broadcaster because you don't like the fact that there are questions about the war that are being asked by civilians across the country. These are not like things that CBS is just making up, or any station. And wartime is essentially when your freedom of press is most valuable. I mean, you think about Vietnam and what people had to say at home about those things. Those questions had to be shown to the American people to show that they weren't on an island alone feeling ways, whether they supported or didn't support the war. There's a variety of feelings. The president has not adequately explained this war to a large portion of the country that's dissatisfied on his side of the aisle and on other sides of the aisle. And I think that's a red flag when you have three different entities of our government, from the president to Hegseth to Brendan Carr, all jumping down the throats of media as opposed to asking for more answers that would clarify anything that's wrong. Wrong is wrong. So if an article is incorrect, that's one thing. But media, for being critical, saying that all media wants us to lose the war, is incorrect. I think people want answers about what the actual plan is.
So I take it you would not think this is good if members of Congress sent denunciations of private media companies for saying things that were not aligned with the
For example,
Congress.
for example,
Elizabeth Warren, who does that routinely to Amazon, Facebook, other social media sites that platformed speech that she disagreed with.
I don't like. So
Russia,
let me say, I don't like the way that
COVID, about any number
fair
of things.
point. I don't like the way that Trump behaves when he calls out and has open letters to media companies. But the action is the real thing that I say is against our First Amendment rights and freedom of the press. When Brendan Carr is threatening to revoke licenses because of a feeling Trump has, there's a difference between having a feeling and being a leader and asking
Democrats
for change.
have threatened to revoke liability protections for companies that for cable channels that show Newsmax and Fox News. They did that.
Okay, so again, you always want me to say that right is because one person did it, the other person shouldn't do it. I think both shouldn't do it. There we go. We can agree on that. I think both should not do it.
Very nice.
Okay.
President Trump is in talks with Cuba as the country dealt with violent protests over the weekend. Don't go anywhere.